lights and sirens, yeah, it's time to go. No time to defund us. You should know that we're not perfect. We're human, we're flawed. Just save us some grace for the sake of us all. We're holding that thin blue line, 'cause that's what we do. We don't do it for the glory, we do it for you.
Hello, Vax Choice and Cloud Hub community. Thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of In the Lion's Den, hosted by Dr. Bill Lionberger. How are you doing today, Dr. Bill?
I'm doing great. Enjoying December, staying warm. Looking forward to Christmas.
Yes, me too. Well, today we have two guests on who have been on our show before, but it's been a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh the audience on who they are. We've got Mary Fanning, who is an investigative journalist, national security expert, and co-producer of the Absolute Proof documentary series. Her groundbreaking reporting has exposed illegal port leases, covert surveillance programs, and the truth behind the Benghazi attack. She is the host of the National Security Hour, a best-selling author on invisible treason in America, and has been honored with the rank of colonel for her service to this nation. We also have Jeff O'Donnell, who's a software and database engineer with over 40 years of private sector experience. He has worked with major institutions, including the Rockwell International, Westinghouse Nuclear, and the Penn State Applied Research Laboratory. Over the past 5 years, he has applied advanced data analytics to research U.S. elections, including the 2020 general election that we know was, it is what it is. It's pretty obvious by this much time passing. But anyways, I look forward to hearing from both of these guests, and I will be in the background enjoying the show, Dr. Bill, and I'll be back at the end for questions.
Perfect. Welcome to In the Lion's Den today. Today's show, Operation Vote Switch, Paper or Perish, where the truth meets the ballot box and the war for our democratic future lives or dies. In America, our freedom begins with the ballot. For centuries, it has been our voice, our right, and our power. But today, the power is under siege from invisible hands inside machines that count what we can't see to many other forms of election fraud. From the outside, our elections look secure. Official seals, complex machines, confident officials, but behind the curtain, a different story unfolds. Our elections have been stolen by remote access points, hidden computer codes, compromised networks, software programmers, and voter fraud. In essence, we are dealing with a web of foreign and domestic enemies that have turned our democratic process into a deadly digital theater to control and steal our elections and switch election outcomes. The reality: technology has become the weakness of the republic. The machines meant to count our votes were created as perfect tools for election manipulation. We have the data trails, proving without a doubt how votes can vanish, switch, or be fabricated. If we continue to allow computers and other enemies to decide our elections and leaders, we will finally surrender our democracy to code written by our enemies. This isn't speculation. It's documented and investigated with sworn evidence of ballots being switched and results being reprogrammed against the will of the people. The solution isn't more software. It's sunlight, transparency, and paper ballots counted by human hands. And with that, I would like to bring on our very special guests today, Mary Fanning and Jeff O'Donnell. Welcome to you both.
Dr. Bill, it's a pleasure to be with you. Jeff as well.
As we end the year in 2025, I can't think of anything more critically important. With all of the positive things that have been accomplished and are being accomplished, it will be for naught if our elections continue to be stolen, not only here, but around the world, and all of the bad forces get back in control and everything that the ground we've gained is lost. So for me, this is, I think, one of the, if not the most important show to really discuss, this thing, and the circumference of this, the size of this, and the reality that we face, right?
Absolutely, Dr. Bill. It is the civil rights issue of our generation to protect all the other rights. We need the right to a completely fair, completely honest system of elections, and we do not have any of those things right now.
I wanted to kind of kick things off with Mary. She has such a really good handle on this global perspective, because when we talk about election fraud, this isn't just a homegrown, ragtag bunch of people. We're talking about countries. We're talking about hundreds of programmers. We're talking about organizations that their entire process and procedures circle around election interference, fraud, defeating those at every corner, and studying it nonstop, day and night. Right, Mary?
Absolutely. Put it in the context of Stalin. It matters not who votes, only who counts the vote. And that's why it's so important what you just said, that it must be paper ballots, hand counted, no electronics involved. Now, we're getting a narrative that is being sold to the people right now, that Venezuela and Serbia stole our election. There's some truth to that. But there's a foundational truth that is not being told to the American people, and that is that the ES&S technology that came from Nebraska went to Serbia through a forced divestiture to Dominion in Serbia. Now, understand that Eric Holder's Justice Department with Obama put through the forced divestiture in 2010. They gave ES&S's technology to Dominion. That technology and nearly a third of the electronic voting systems market in America went to Serbia, but it came through the forced divestiture by Eric Holder and Barack Hussein Obama, and it came out of Nebraska. So understand that we have insiders who put the technology, the ES&S software, into Serbia, and that is foundational to the truth. So that took place in 2010 under Obama and Holder. The idea that they put all of our technology into Serbia is quite a nice cover, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And maybe the bigger picture. So we have multiple countries that are involved in this fraud, right? I mean, we've got China. We've got other players. Are they all working in consort? Are they working separately? Are they attacking us from different fronts? What's your understanding?
They're attacking us from multiple fronts, not just on the technology front. I mean, we've known since under Bill Clinton that the Pentagon's computers had back doors. China had back doors into all of our computers in the Pentagon. So we have not only our adversaries working in concert, but so too the traitors within. The traitors within. So they not only do we now also know about Hammer and Scorecard, the prismatic scoring algorithm that steals the votes in 3% increments. We know with Montgomery's testimony that was just played in the Coomer Lindell case that he said, well, it's not just the vulnerabilities in these computers, it's also goes to Hammer and Scorecard. And that's imperative to understand. That testimony was never to be seen. It was SAP information. It was to remain sealed. But Judge Wong played it in the Colorado case. And amazingly, Dr. Bill, no one commented on that. Not a word.
I was listening to some of the Liddell comments coming out of that and one of the things that really struck me was he said that I think he and another said that there are over 14 ways that they can adjust the algorithm in these electronics, and maybe Jeff can speak to it, but many, many ways that they can continue to adjust the algorithm, because their focus is to make it so that you can't actually track possibly what they've done. So not only are all of these machines, right, I think, as I understand it, have access to the internet and basically can be run from outside, but then they're also focusing on ways to cover their tracks.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand we have 5 vendors who run elections in this country. And evidence has been found, I've found some of it, that all 5 of them are involved, and especially in 2020, as far as the evidence goes, were involved in some way, well, in the same way, actually, in the stealing of the election. And so it just points to more, some people, we can't solve this problem by saying, well, let's just eliminate Dominion, or what they're called now. We can't solve this problem by just getting rid of ES&S. This is a across the board problem. And as long as we have a computer system that is counting our votes, then someone can mess with that computer system and do whatever they want, whether it's the external hacking that we're talking about, from both internal and foreign and domestic sources, to just in machine kind of manipulation that I have seen. All of those go away if we go to hand counted paper ballots.
It's like the first most critical, I think, piece to wipe away their foothold, because they're stealing elections in many other ways. I mean, stuffing the ballots and all kinds of other ways, which you folks can elaborate on. But the one area where they can actually really trip the switch is electronically. If they get the data that they're trying to get, that they work to get on the front end, because the mail-in ballot thing is all about them really getting the data to know how much to steal, right? And so that's when you trip that up, I think that you put a big, a big chink in their armor. And isn't that kind of what happened? What do you know about what happened in this last election, for president? Isn't that what we did also? Maybe Mary, you know something about that, where we shut down their ability on some level to get it done?
Well, some things happened, and yes, there are between 12 and 17 ways that they can steal the votes. But remember, there's something else. And we heard Eric Coomer in the Chicago precinct saying that there were modems in his computer. And his voting machines. That means they connect to the internet. But we can simplify this in a grand way. And that is that the American people are to have oversight over their elections. Oversight over their elections. The American people cannot read the codes of ones and zeros with the voting system, so they have no true oversight.
Another thing that comes to mind is I read some things about they have made the voting machines and the screens that go with those pretty much, they don't give you access to the source code and the data that's inside and the way things are coming and going. They intentionally make it so it's pretty like dumbed down. Do this, do this, do this. But you don't really have access to go inside as an end user to see, well, is this thing working right or not? Or can I track what's going on? They've literally set it up so you cannot do that. So it takes a computer engineer, Jeff and others, to break this stuff down. So that you get inside and you can prove up what's going on. And I hear that maybe a lot of that evidence may be coming out at the beginning of the year. What do you hear?
Well, we hear that there's things underway, but there's also other things that are very concerning that are underway. You just had Julian Assange, his interview come out and telling how Hillary Clinton was involved in the Uranium One deal. Understand that Uranium One deal, John Podesta, Julian Assange is saying, is involved in that deal as well. And they were paid off by Russia. Whether that has been proven yet or not is not clear. But we do know that handing over 23% of U.S. uranium gives the enemy the ability to strike us with our own nuclear signature. And yes, you're exactly right. All of us are not Jeff O'Donnell. This is, someone who actually can read the computers, take it apart, put it together, and find all the evidence. What he has done is terribly important. There's not many others that have his talents. So it's important to take his word when he says paper ballots only, hand counted, no electronics.
I also ran across some things related, like right now, I think in Texas, I think 5 counties have are voting or have voted to literally strike out the machines and go to 100% paper ballot, because one of the arguments is, oh, we can't get it done on time. The reality is that you've only shown that you can't get it done in time because you're stealing it. You know, you're using the electronics to steal it. You got to wait long enough to get enough data to steal it. It seems like the only truth of the matter is if you do a hand count, you can track it, you can watch it. You can't really game it electronically, and that's about the only one you can trust.
There have been tests run this year on hand counting using 1,000, 1,500, which is a good size of a precinct. And nothing should actually be higher than that. It's another thing we need to work on. But in all of those cases, not only was the accuracy perfect in most cases, the time shows that they would have easily gotten it done on election night, which we don't do now using the machines.
Which we used to do, right? We used to get it done on time.
It used to be done on time. You knew when you went to bed on election night, almost every time, who had won the election. And it seems the more we rely on the machines, and the more, I'm glad you mentioned the mail-in, the more we rely on the mail-ins and switch to that, the worse things are too, because that's a huge fraud vector as well. As Mary mentioned, there are 12 to 17 fraud vectors. I've done a lot of concentration on looking at the mail-in ballots in 2020, and it's a house of horrors as well. So that's another issue that definitely needs to be addressed. And you look back and we were doing just fine before all of this, before the machines became ubiquitous, before there was such a thing as mail-in voting universally. And so, we fixed a problem that didn't exist and created all of these avenues for fraud and deceit.
And when you say we, I mean, we're talking about counties, we're talking about states, we're talking about swing states, which Trump took them all. But we're talking about all of these different fights all around the country where they're working against you to gain this ground, so they have this leeway to have these mail-in ballots. And so what kind of sweeping way can, like a sweeping way to handle the electronics is say no electronics, right? How can you use in a sweeping way shut down this mail-in program?
It has to be done through executive order and then through legislation.
Okay.
And the evidence is there if they care to look at it. We have found enough evidence to get rid of the machines. If the people knew, the general people, people out in the country understood what has been found, not only with the machines, but with the mail-in ballots, they would be calling for this, I'm pretty sure, in a pretty good majority of people. But there's a full court press on to keep that information from getting out to the public. They're told the old same, hey, safe, secure, gold star elections, nothing to worry about here, and they believe it.
Yeah, just like vaccines, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Doc Bill, that's an important point when you mention the vaccines, because only under the COVID emergency were they able to get so many paper ballots. Remember, we were finding paper ballots not even opened, 100% for Trump on the sides of roads that were being dumped. So they're able to read things computer-wise that people can't see with their eyes. And so the idea that you have all this vote by mail is just an opportunity to cheat and steal. But they're not just stealing a vote. They're stealing America, and they're stealing our freedom. This has been a tectonic shift that must be remedied. We must take the country back. The president must put through paper ballots under executive action, under the color of a national emergency. The House and the Senate then need to codify this. We cannot let our elections be stolen also by people that were brought into our country to run a color revolution on us.
One of the things I've heard is that now we're with the data that's being compiled from Jeff and others, that we have more ballots showing up than registered voters in some states, and you probably can shed light on that, right? I mean,
We
Yeah,
had
that is
200,000 more ballots than voters just in Pennsylvania.
but there's nothing to see here.
Nothing.
Nothing to see here.
Unless, of course, you're Jeff O'Donnell who can read code.
well, everywhere the rare cases where we have been able to see into these election machines, every single time we find evidence of manipulation, of ballots being deleted and recreated, and all this stuff. This is why they don't want us to look into the machines, and this is why there is no fix for this. There is no perfect computer to because there's always going to be software behind it. There's always going to be somebody, a human being that's writing this software that can be bought, that can be coerced to change it. If banks had the same kind of security that our election does, you'd wake up every morning with an empty bank account.
A new balance or a different balance. I want to move over to the action that we're taking right now with Venezuela, right? It's on the surface, we're shutting down a critically important thing that's killing hundreds of thousands of, Americans with fentanyl and drugs and the major drug cartels. But it is really one of the home bases for this electronic steel and the people that are behind it and the cartels that are behind it. And there's a lot of money at stake here, right? I mean, this is big business, isn't it?
Very much so. But it's also this doesn't just go to the cartels and the big business. It also goes to Lord Mark Malloch Brown and his connections to George Soros. And it also is, as I said, stealing our country. But look at the 2020 stolen election and the downstream of that. Open borders, 20 million people in the country. Trafficking children in the United States of America. All the children that came across the border went missing. In what world are we living with this evil taking control of our nation? And that goes right back to Barack Hussein Obama and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I reported on the one-time POW, 7 years. And Jeremiah Denton came forward and he said the most dangerous man in the U.S. Senate, should he ever gain control of this country, he will destroy it, is Joe Biden.
Well, didn't President Trump pretty much wipe out most of his executive orders because he determined that they were auto-penned and that wasn't lawful?
Illegal.
Yeah, illegal. Yeah. What I think would be interesting is what's the substance of that? Because that's a lot of executive orders. What have we actually effectively wiped out, and what's just changed if that's happened? Because you would think that some of it would bear on elections as well.
I don't know, Dr. Bill, am I impatient? Where are the handcuffs?
Right? Where are the handcuffs?
Yeah, we're all waiting for some of these things to be challenged, because that they're going to be challenged when they're done. It's one thing to say all of these orders and rulings are null and void. So when do we get Ketanji Brown off the Supreme Court if her order was signed with an auto pen? When do we have a lot of these leftist federal judges who are right now waking up every morning trying to come up with another way to stop America first, to stop Donald Trump? When do we start seeing them kicked out and replaced? This is the natural next thing. If you're saying that these were invalid, illegal orders, and then where I agree with you, where is the results of that? We need to see that start happening, because it's going to be challenged in the courts. It's going to be a big deal. It needs to get to the Supreme Court, obviously, and I'm not seeing the start of that yet, and it is a little frustrating.
Right.
But there's a problem with that that's very important, Jeff. We've been watching Jack Smith running his operations against Trump, his attack on America. We've been seeing Mike Morrell and John Brennan's emails between one another to hide Hunter's laptop and even talking about taking down America. We see Norm Eisen, who how many times has he sued with his deep state war on President Trump. Then we find out that Norm Eisen is in bed with members of the Supreme Court and that he was having John Roberts visit him overseas in his mansion. And so, how do we feel about uh, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts if he's that tight with Norm Eisen weighing in on this? This people have to understand that if you come to destroy America, there will be consequences. We can't just sit here hoping for handcuffs. This is the most serious attack that has ever been run on America. Everything that Obama and Biden did with their transformation of America and their implementation of communism, and they're running the Bolshevik 2.0 on this country. There must be consequences.
You know, an example of that is Trump is got everybody's attention around the world.
Yeah.
They're seeing our biggest aircraft carrier down in the Gulf of America and its contingent forces for, a lot of reasons. And we want to see that same horsepower inside our country. Right now, what do we have? Tina Peters, right? She's supposedly a witness for the federal side because she preserved election fraud evidence, right? And so that is a perfect place to start if you want to start wielding the sword and come in and take charge. Just like we are around the world, people going, Trump's back in charge, we better pay attention. Well, inside our country, people need to have the same come to Jesus moment, I think.
I think people need to become aware. Outside of Colorado, it's still very difficult to find people who are following the Tina Peters case, which of course, she was a Soviet-style show trial that put her in jail for 9 years for doing her job, and the pressure, I think, has to partly come from the people. They've got to realize that injustice has been done here, and demand that their representatives, get the information out that something is done. There are ways, as you said, you can make her an official federal witness to an investigation of Colorado's elections, and frankly, even more than their elections need investigated. Right. Name her that and send the marshals and see if they're willing to have a shootout in front of the prison for all to see. Let's see how much they want to keep her silenced, which really that's what this is about. This is keeping her silenced.
And Dr. Bill, there was an important piece of information. Why didn't Conan Hayes, who actually took the data and worked with Tina, why didn't he testify at her trial? Now, Conan Hayes worked for Mike Lindell and for General Flynn. And so he has insights into what took place in that election, and he certainly should have been required to testify.
Yeah. So there's more going on. And, is it not can't just be lawfare where we've decided that we don't like Trump and we have Trump derangement syndrome, and so we're not gonna play. It's a much bigger problem than that. I think the problem that they have is that they were working to steal elections, and she's got the real goods, and they are working to not let it come out. But my sense is the bigger they make this, the bigger that information becomes when it comes out. If we have Absolutely. To go to a standoff because we are the bigger bear federally, they're going to lose. They're not going to win. Okay. It's not winnable for them. So it's like, how much do you want to lose? Little, lose large. That's my thought.
I've made the statement that I think that Governor Paulus and Secretary of State Griswold would see the country burn before they willingly allow her out of prison. And just, think about that for a second. I mean, this is pure hatred based upon fear, really. They are so afraid of this 70-year-old Gold Star mother who was sitting languishing ill in a jail cell. That they don't care. They're hoping the clock runs out. Frankly, they're hoping that I'm sure they're hoping that she dies in prison, and that takes care of their problem.
And they've multiple times have put her in the hole. So this 70-year-old woman put in the hole, being persecuted, not allowing the full truth. Until Conan Hayes testifies, no one has the full truth. So why they did not have him testify is beyond me, because then the whole trial was a setup. It was a full-on persecution, and they're hiding information. When have we ever seen politicians go to war like they have and these last years under Trump and under Biden, sending the FBI to spy on Catholics, or the Attorney General going along with this kind of thing under Obama and Biden? We're seeing a war being waged on the American people and their freedoms and on our Constitution. And until these people are exposed, they will not stop. But beyond that, we have Obama having put through the Smith Modernization Act, which gave them the right to lie to the American people, to run a psyop and not tell the truth. That's why the legacy media is dying, because the people are sick of them lying to them, but it's legal lying, and Smith-Munt modernization of 2012 must be reversed. The truth, like it had been since 1948, must be demanded.
Mary, what do you think about the legal remedies here for the federal government? I mean, obviously, the last thing that we would probably see is a shootout, because that's probably not going to happen. But how do you see? Do you see it's going to have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court if there's arguments and fights, or do you see us having the ability to go, yeah, we're showing up and we're getting her out of it. We're going to break her out, with a full presidential pardon?
Well, he should make her a federal witness. I think that's underway.
Yeah.
And I hope we do not go to full-on shootouts in front of the jail. I hope that they do the right thing and release her. The president has executive privilege. They do not. And if they want to, and they do, they want to continue to destroy the country. That's what Obama and who and what he is. That's what Biden. And if you the disgust I have for these traitors.
Your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, it's entirely correct. At the core of this, I think a lot of this could be shortcut, not only the Tina situation, but more specifically the problem with the election machines and the mail-in voting. Could be best done, I think, through a national emergency declaration authorization, because our elections have been officially named part of our critical national infrastructure. There has been, and there is plenty of evidence of this, there have been attacks upon our elections by both foreign and domestic entities. If that doesn't justify a national emergency authorization, I don't know what is. And that would give the president broad powers to enact these things without a lot of at least immediate judicial oversight. And the problem is so critical that I hope actually that that's the way that he decides to accomplish it.
Well, the president says we have truckloads of rigged election information coming out. I'm thinking maybe hopefully the first of the year. I'm sure they're getting their ducks in a row, because like many have said, whether it's Lindell or Flynn or others, we only got one time to get this right? We got to get this right when this comes out, so it's not dismissed. It's yesterday's news in the day, right? So they're going to have to roll truckloads of this out in ways that you really have no place to jump, and lie about it, which is what they're going to try to do every which way. But when you have that much evidence, then it sets up a sort of a cascade of things like you're talking about, the emergency use authorization. And then we have the midterms coming. And so it's really important here that this sort of gets addressed right before the midterms.
We must. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Absolutely. If we do not address this by the midterms,
Exactly.
They will seal the House and the Senate most likely. And then it's going to be an impeachment per day that President Trump will have to deal with. And who knows, if they can make one of those stick eventually. It will doom his presidency. Whatever plans he had for the back half of his presidency will be gone. Will be done. And I don't think, like Mary, I don't think there's any doubt about that, is there?
None whatsoever. But Jeff, what we're seeing too is we've had a look-see into how our country works with Doge. And we see how our politicians are being blackmailed and leveraged, and they all get a nice handout of a bunch of cash. But we're also seeing that the world, our adversaries have come together to destroy America. They're all in on this. What took place at our border, I am a Catholic. And I see what took place that was exposed, that Obama and Biden were working with Francis, the bad Pope, to overrun our border, to run all these people into our country so that the American people have no say so. That's also to take away their voice and their elections. Biden was trying to bring in 20 million people because he needed them. The Dems, the Commie-crats need new voters because the American people have turned against them. When you see who is funding these border runs and you see those who have come together to destroy America, they are the new world order. And if the American people plan on having freedom, or their children or their children's children, then they must show up and make a difference in these midterms, because we may lose the country after that if we do not win in the midterms.
If I may quickly, you're absolutely right. But to point out the fundamental fact of it, yes, he wanted these 20 million or more. He really doesn't want them to vote. He wants their identities to be able to vote, and that is an important distinction. These illegals coming into the country are very hesitant to do anything that intersects them with our government or legal processes. Okay, so they do not vote when they come in, which makes them a perfect target to use. Get their names on the voter rolls. You got a real person there, and then their identity can be used to cast mail-in ballots.
And that's just what they did with Motor Voter, where you're registering all these people and they're using those names and just stealing votes. And that's what we saw taking place in Georgia.
The numbers, I'm kind of a numbers guy. The numbers fascinate me. Basically, looking at some of the guys from Lindell that did the math and extrapolated out the manipulation of the vote, the media would have us believe that we're a 50-50. You got 50-50 Republicans and Democrats. The reality is, when it extrapolates out from their work, it's 66% red, and they think higher, closer to 70%.
Mm-hmm.
When you say they need the 20 million, they need all of it, okay, to try to even compete. So the only way they can even begin to compete is to steal in all of these different ways, because they don't have the real bodies. And then they got to take all of these fabricated ones and try to, what a project for them to make happen. And yet they were successful in 2020. So, yeah, it's critically important that we somehow defeat this. One, too big to steal in all the ways, internal and external, for the midterms. I'm thinking that, Trump and his team know how critically important this is. But do you have any insight as to what they're doing to defeat it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is I did the Absolute series for Lindell and brought in all the subject matter experts. These are the people that knew what they were talking about, firsthand evidence, like Jeff. And the only way to defeat this, you cannot use electronics. There's multiple ways to steal. And as Jeff has said, and President Trump, I hope will come out and say, paper ballots, hand counted only.
Single day of voting.
Under emergency use, Jeff, could he create an order under that to eliminate electronic voting?
Absolutely, he could. There would be screams, of course, from a lot of people, a lot of counties, and a lot of other people, but I don't necessarily care about that. I want to do what's the right thing to save our country, no matter what it costs, frankly. And again, national infrastructure is our elections. our computers that we use for our elections would not pass muster to use in a clerk's office in the military. Okay, they do not have that degree of security in that. So it's not even a question. It's just when it has to be, or else we're done. You mentioned I think they overshot in 2020 with the fake votes. That's why you have 2020 being such an outlier across the board as far as votes, especially for Biden votes for Biden. I think that they overshot, and that just caused that even gave even more reason to question what's going on. Especially, you've seen the comparisons between 2020 and 2024.
Same
Yeah,
exact
they
graph.
messed up. They did. They messed up, or they were forced to mess up because their computer algorithms went haywire. I know that Trump's support in 2020 was higher than they expected. I know that caused them some big issues during the election. And I think they just kept having to add more and more and more to get the numbers to work out for them. It would be funny if it wasn't, soul crushing.
And having similar systems in critical locations shut down all at the same time in the middle of the night, right? That wasn't a suspect?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But also having identical blocks of votes stealing at 2:00 in the morning, stealing Wisconsin and Michigan. That's not suspect at all, is it?
Right.
That was panic on their part. That was the total panic move that shows what they were doing in that election. That Wisconsin and Michigan thing, because they didn't want to. I don't think that was part of their original plan.
Right. Just like Hillary losing wasn't part of the original plan. They thought the fix was in. Same with this last candidate. I won't even mention her name. So here we are faced with, what's going to happen at the beginning of the year, what's going on behind the scenes to stop the steal again, because everything hangs in the balance again, right? In the midterms, and you can't roll forward with your agenda if you don't get that done. Back to Operation Vote Switch, the name of the show. So shutting it down. We're getting to the end of this section of the show. We're going to go to Q&A soon, but I wanted to get some thoughts from both of you before we move into that. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, so our elections are being stolen through a mix of absentee ballot fraud, election computer manipulation, cyber attacks. We also had John Ratcliffe come out the day after J6 on J7 and saying China entered our election. So when our adversaries are entering our election and they can steal the ballots in a cyber way, then it's time to have the American people stand behind paper ballots only. And you can't just stand there and go and vote. You have to actually get active, bring other people to vote. And also, when President Trump goes to paper ballots, start calling your congressman. Put the pressure on them to do what's called for at this point and to support paper ballots only.
I completely agree. And one thing I would add to that is, if you're watching this, and if, as we hope, we do go to hand-counted paper ballots, one of the reasons that they say that this won't work is that they need too many people. Well, I don't believe that. When that happens, we're going to need people to simply volunteer to help in a number of different ways. So, and there are a lot of resources out there that you can become familiar with the process of hand counting. There's a couple different excellent methods that have been tested out over this year. And they will work, and they will get the election counted in time, and they will be accurate. And we want to take away that kind of, they know that it's cheaper. Okay, now it's definitely cheaper to hand count than use these election computers. And we know, because of the tests that we've done, that it's accurate. And so the last thing as well, we'll never get enough people. So just, as always, we need good people to stand in the gap and volunteer when that time comes, when the calls go out, which they will. If you can help.
And it puts more eyes and ears on the problem. More people looking. You see something, say something. It makes it harder, I think, for the opposition, because it's not like stopping the vote at 3 in the morning and then flipping a switch and then letting them come in and do a thing. Literally, you're all there doing it in plain sight with a lot of them cameras and everything else rolling. So I think it makes it harder for anything to really have to get bandwidth to where this is working with that's working with that, because that's part of how they do it. They tie them together, right? And they get them to work in consort so they can get this sort of crescendo going to flip something. But it makes it harder when you're doing manual counting. I wanted to bring Melissa back in for some Q&A and get some of her thoughts and questions. Hey, Melissa.
Hi. Yeah. So I guess one of my questions is, why are they able to use that? It's a bad excuse, but the excuse that we can't use paper ballots because it takes too long. But what did they do before electronic voting? So how are we able to defend that? I know we have a bigger population now, but how are we able to defend that or get around that when they say that it takes too long?
Well, the first thing we're doing is these very public tests that are being done to show that. You're right. Back in the old days, we did not have a problem with this. Now, I will say that since that time, there are a few, not many, but there are a few mega precincts, meaning that there are some precincts that have been created in this country that are way more than the 1,500 or 2,000 that would be a reasonable maximum for a precinct, and those may have to be carved up. Now, I'm not talking about redistricting here. I'm just talking about recarving the precincts just for election purposes. It's just redrawing a map. That's all it is, and that's something that's going to have to be done. But again, the vast majority of precincts in this country fall under the 2,000 level, which is by most of the methods that I've seen on the hand counting, there should not be any issue at all. We will have the results of the elections much sooner than we have in the last decade.
And hopefully we've got past the hanging Chad problem, right?
I think we're past the hanging Chad problem. We should have just hung Chad to begin with, I think, and then solved that problem.
Another question.
It's also imperative to keep in mind that there is no oversight if it is a computer machine that is counting the vote. If you can't see the computer code, then you're not getting oversight. And so that goes back to what is taking place in this country. There's plenty of politicians that love this because the American people have no voice in the country. And if you want to have a voice in your own country, as it is we the people, and they are supposed to answer to us, then we must have paper ballots.
Imagine this, Melissa, just real quick. Imagine a room where they are hand counting a precinct. There are cameras covering the entire area of the tables, and they're being live streamed. So anybody who's interested can watch them check off the ballots and see if they make a mistake. Can you imagine? I can't imagine a more secure and, frankly, a more representative system, allowing just normal voters, if they want to, they can watch for an hour and see, yeah, they're doing a good job. Or, oh, I saw something, and have a little number that they can call or something.
See if any suitcases come out from under the table.
Yeah, people can
Exactly.
It's true representative democracy at that point.
And remember something, after World War II, not too long after, a sheriff and his men came in to steal the vote and to steal all the ballot boxes. And that was, I believe, in Athens, Georgia. Correct me if I'm not correct, Jeff. And it went into a shootout. And no one was charged because the sheriff and his men did not have the right to come and take control of the ballots. So this is the point where our freedom starts and ends. So we must get control of the ballot so that we have a voice in our own country.
My favorite part of that story, Mary, is the man who led the armed, essentially, attack to get the ballot boxes so that they could get a good count of the ballots. became sheriff afterwards.
We like those sheriffs.
Well, so I totally agree with there is a place and a time that it's good to have surveillance and stuff like that. But if you're in kind of the mind of me is of and throughout history, we see our government consistently doing this thing where they take advantage of a crisis, right? And so something that I thought of a couple years ago was what if they're using all of this illegal immigration flooding and we can't trust the elections and everything to do digital IDs or digital surveillance to extreme like facial tracking, recognition, all of that scary stuff from China. Do you think that that's a possibility? The only reason it's concerning for me, even with Trump is buddy buddy with these big tech guys, right? And the people that are the leaders of AI and all of that. So that's the only reason it kind of scares me.
No, and you should be scared. And, they're implementing a police state if they get away with this. We're going into Chinese social credit scores. Do you want to live under a Chinese social credit scores? Where the people that they don't like, they simply arrest and they take their organs and they use them for prison food. We cannot go into a police state, a Soviet America. And that is what is underway if the American people do not get the vote back. And if they don't let our politicians know that they work for us. And at the same time, do you want everyone having cameras, every place, following you, spying on you? That is a police state. That is not America. That is not what, we all fought for. That is not what freedom looks like.
And inalienable rights.
Yeah.
Another question that there is I thought that we couldn't retire a Supreme Court justice. What can be done to shift the seats in the Supreme Court?
That's a great question because you're right. There's no way they can be potentially impeached, but I don't think that is an option. I think what can be done, it would have to be done behind the scenes, but I think that Chief Justice Roberts needs to be convinced that it is time to take his retirement. And this could be done in a number of ways. To make him realize that now is the right time for him to enjoy his retirement and clear the way for Chief Justice Clarence Thomas. How does that sound?
You're so kind, Jeff.
Go ahead, Mary.
You're so very kind, Jeff. And I'll also state, if Ketanji Brown were put in place with the auto pen, which was completely illegal, then, she loved dancing and singing on Broadway, then I suggest it's probably time to go back there and pick up where she left off. You cannot have foundational acts of crime deciding where this country goes. All that has to be, you have to think also, they stole 2020. The amount of breathtaking crime that it took place from the time that the communist Dems took control of this country was certainly a learning curve. And it must have consequences, because if you have someone run a coup and the destruction of America and there are no consequences, then expect it will happen over and over again. It's also all the monies that they stole from the taxpayer, the billions upon billions upon billions that were going out of this country. What we saw, how they were using USAID to stuff people's pockets. That's not the way the games work. That is not why we pay taxes. If this is what they do with our tax dollars or our property tax monies, then I guess it's time to tell them to stuff it.
One final question, Melissa.
Well, Mary kind of answered my last one, but I guess something else that I guess I could ask in relation to all of this is what makes it to where, what do you think would have to happen soon in order for people to trust the election system? Because I know that switching from electric to paper wouldn't be like a quick thing. I don't think anyways. What's something that could happen in the shorter term?
Nothing. Paper ballots, hand counted, that's it. There is no short term. If we do not get paper ballots hand counted, listen, they have brought people from all over and they ran an election and they did just that. And Jeff, I think it was 12 hours that they got the whole thing counted and recounted and got it done correct. We can only go to hand counted paper ballots.
There's something called blockchain technology they're working on. This is a question, is that that they're trying to secure the electronic voting. So you don't think that that's any better, any help whatsoever?
No.
No, you still have technology behind it that can be subverted. I don't care what anyone says. At some point, someone holds the keys to the car, and so you're letting your whole election, the fairness of it, depend upon, again, a few people, and we just can't ever do that again. And my answer to the last question, where you asked about how do we convince people that it's a fair election again, I think it has something to do with it would have something to do with those truckloads of evidence. I think I have one truckload outside my house right now, but those truckloads of evidence that the president talked about, you've got to make the case. He's got to have a fireside chat. He's got to talk to the American people and run them through what happened with these machines. And I think at that point, it's going to make sense to them that it's a lot, it's a lot harder to cheat massively with paper ballots hand counted than it is with these machines. And so it's almost like, I think you have to, maybe you can't convince them that the paper ballots are intrinsically fair, although they should have that in their head. It just makes sense. But if you convince them what we're coming from is a house of horrors, then they will, I think, gladly run to and accept the paper ballots.
Final thoughts, Mary. You get the final word.
Well, if we plan on having a country going forward, if we plan on freedom, then we have to have paper ballots hand counted. The things that have taken place since Barack Hussein Obama arrived on the scene, the amount, just imagine what Joe Biden did, bringing terrorists that he let the Taliban choose 200,000 to come into our country. If you don't take back your country now, you will never have an opportunity to do so. So stand up, America. It's time to weigh in to save your country.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jeff, for an amazing show. I think it's a salient point to end the year on, that we've got to, make it too big to steal. Everybody's got to do their part to show up when it's time to vote. And we've got to put pressure on our legislators to, push for the paper ballots. There doesn't seem to be a way around it at this point to help ensure that it can't be stolen again. So again, thank you both for being on the show. Look forward to another show. And thanks for joining us on In the Lion's Den. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Bill.
Thank you, Dr. Bill.
Blue lights and sirens, yeah, it's time to go. No time to defund us. You should know that we're not perfect. We're human, we're flawed. Just save us some grace for the sake of us all.